The moment she slid the termination papers across the table without looking up, I knew two things. One, she hadn't read a single report I'd written in 6 years. And two, she'd just made the most expensive mistake in the company's history. My name is Daniel Royce. I'm 42 years old, and up until about 4 hours ago, I was the Chief Strategy Officer at Virion, a billion-dollar tech-adjacent consultancy that made its fortune riding the intersection of data, branding, and behavioral economics. My team didn't just outperform, we were the performance. 69.6% of Virion's annual revenue last fiscal year came directly from divisions under my oversight. That wasn't spin. That was math. And apparently, none of it mattered to the new CEO. She was fresh off a headline-laced hire, known more for her social media virality than executive depth. Rumors said she'd been poached from a startup where she tripled engagement but tanked revenue. The board loved her vision. They always do, until the vision starts asking for oxygen. Your strategy is sound. For 1975, she said without a flicker of irony. Her nails clicked against the edge of her tablet as she pushed the envelope forward. Not a manila folder, not a direct conversation, an envelope, like I was being handed a party invitation. She never made eye contact, not once. I smiled, not out of amusement, more like muscle memory. I reached for the envelope, held it like it might bite, then stood up slowly, letting the weight of silence do the talking for me. You sure you want to do this? I asked, not as a threat, but as a final courtesy. Still no eye contact. We need someone who lives in the current algorithm. I looked at her, really looked, perfectly curated aesthetic, LinkedIn buzzwords wearing heels, and a mind that confused performance metrics with momentum. A tourist in the house I helped build. So I did what any cornered strategist would do. I shook her hand, said thank you, and walked out without saying another word. In the elevator, I could feel the air press differently, like gravity was testing me. I didn't blink. I just let it hit. 12 floors down, silent ride, nothing but the faint whir of corporate machinery humming behind the walls. By the time I reached the parking structure, the numbness was gone. In its place, something cleaner, sharper. I didn't need the badge. I didn't need the title. What I had was leverage, embedded across contracts, strategy decks, onboarding systems, and high-value relationships that weren't loyal to the logo. They were loyal to me. I got into my car, let it idle. Stared out at the row of spaces I used to pace during phone calls. The little battlefield of late-night pivots and pre-dawn launches. That space had memory. But sentiment's a luxury you can't afford after you've been quietly executed. An hour later, I was on the rooftop of the Vestry Hotel downtown. The sky was low with cloud light, and the city looked like it hadn't slept in weeks. Across from me, Miles Chen was nursing a whiskey. Former strategist turned investor. One of the only people I still trusted in this game. You didn't try to talk her out of it, he asked. Nope. Did you threaten to pull your accounts? Didn't have to. He leaned back. You're calm. I nodded. I just became a ghost in their machine. Let's see how long they last without me. He smirked. You sound like you already know. I do. The bartender slid over a glass of bourbon I didn't order. Miles raised a brow. I shrugged. Old habit. You're not done, are you? He asked. Not even close. The truth is, I could have lit that place on fire. Figuratively, of course. The data I had access to, the internal metrics, the layered strategy flows, the predictive analytics models I designed. It was like I built their GPS, and now they wanted to drive blind because it felt fresher. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about watching the tide go out on people who never learned how to swim. Let me guess, Miles said. You already know the first 3 accounts they're going to lose. Actually, I said, finishing the bourbon, I know the names of the 2 clients who have already emailed me asking for lunch. He laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was reverent. Welcome to the second act, he said. I looked out over the edge of the rooftop, the skyline smeared in amber light. Somewhere down there, she was probably doing her first solo press interview, talking about modernity, velocity, culture-first storytelling, all the right phrases, all the wrong instincts. She thinks the algorithm is something you dance for. I built the damn algorithm. I learned its pulse, its blind spots, its fatigue cycle. And I know exactly when it turns on the people who try to impress it. That's the thing about ghosts in the machine. You don't see us coming until we've already rewritten the code. The first 2 days after I left Virion, I slept more than I had in a year. Not out of exhaustion, just clarity. The kind of sleep that comes when the noise finally cuts off. Like someone yanked the plug out of the wall. No slack. Number 6:30 a.m. forecasting calls. No last-minute rebrands because a competitor posted a viral TikTok. Just quiet. By the 3rd day, the quiet started whispering. I sat at my home office desk, more comfortable than the one at HQ ever was, and pulled out my old moleskin. Black cover, scarred spine, pages filled with chicken scratch notes from years of high-stakes launches and off-record boardroom truths. I started flipping back through time, scanning names, patterns, friction points. The pieces were still there. All I had to do was find the signal buried beneath the static. I opened LinkedIn. No announcement, no post, just a few quiet messages to old contacts, former clients, CMOs, who'd once said things like, "You see the battlefield before the rest of us know we're in a war." I wasn't fishing. I wasn't even selling. I was just asking. How are things going? Settling in with the new leadership? Most answered within hours. Some within minutes. The tone was polite, but I could read between the lines. Interesting pivot toward influencer-first positioning. Feels like a lot of motion lately. Not sure if it's movement. Loud doesn't mean right. I scheduled coffee with one of our top-tier legacy accounts, CEO of a mid-market AI tooling firm. He always played it cool, never too bullish, never too sour. When we sat down at the cafe, he ordered a double espresso and said without prompting, "We were told to try something, but flashier, but it feels like we're doing theater." Define theater, I said. Posts with no substance, hashtag campaigns that trend for a day and drive 0 conversion. We're getting followers, not users, and the board wants results. I nodded, said nothing. Just sipped my black coffee and let the silence do its job. That night, back at my desk, I pulled up Virion's public-facing dashboards. You'd be amazed what you can see if you know where to look. Their engagement metrics were up. She was good at creating noise. I'll give her that. But the conversion rates, the retention curves, downward slope, fast. I started mapping it all. An old habit. Big whiteboard to my left, digital flowchart open on my monitor. I traced revenue streams like blood vessels, tracking client acquisition versus lifetime value. And then I saw it. 3 major contracts in limbo, not canceled, not renewed either. Each one accounting for at least 7 figures. I didn't panic. I didn't celebrate. I just made calls. One CMO answered on the 2nd ring. Another called me back at midnight. The 3rd sent me a calendar invite titled Confidential Check-in. None of them asked me to come back. That wasn't the point. They were just looking for someone who didn't speak in buzzwords. Someone who remembered how to read a market trend without needing a meme to explain it. In every conversation, I made sure of one thing. I never pitched. I just listened, asked questions, offered insights only when asked. It's funny how people will give you the roadmap if you're patient enough not to grab the wheel. Meanwhile, Virion announced a new initiative, Gen Z Vibe Labs. No, I'm not joking. They launched a microsite with neon gradients, pop slang, and a rotating carousel of micro-creators with zero actual ROI. The press ate it up. The board applauded. The numbers, meanwhile, continued their quiet fall. One of the marketing directors I'd once mentored messaged me privately. "We're chasing clout like it's currency. Feels like we're lighting $100 bills to stay warm." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew how this played out. They weren't ready to leave yet, but they were looking at the door. Late one night, around 2 a.m., I stood in the doorway of my office and looked at the board. Client names circled in blue, red lines drawn through revenue gaps, sticky notes like warning flares. It was all starting to shift. I thought about what she'd said, that I didn't live in the current algorithm. The truth is, I don't. I live under it, beneath the vanity metrics, past the clickbait and the branded nonsense. I live where the signal still means something, and the signal was getting clearer. I poured a glass of scotch, just a finger, and stood by the window. The city looked distant, wrapped in sleep. Somewhere up there, she was probably crafting her next LinkedIn sermon. All Polish, no architecture. She wouldn't see the drop until the foundation gave way. And when it did, I wouldn't need to be loud. I'd just need to be ready. The first rule of building something new is knowing when to keep it invisible. We didn't launch with a press release, a logo, or even a landing page. No headlines. No, we're thrilled to announce. Just a simple shared Google Drive, 3 burner phones, and a basement-level corner of a startup loft with no signage on the door. We called it the Beta Ghost Project. Not officially, not legally, just between us. It wasn't a name meant for clients. It was a reminder. We weren't here to be seen. We were here to move in silence and be felt. My team came together faster than I expected. I didn't reach out to anyone directly. I just let the word trickle. One by one, they showed up. Claire had been one of my senior analysts at Virion, fluent in both spreadsheet and subtext. She walked into the loft one morning with no hello, dropped a tablet on the table and said, "Here's their Q2 predictive churn. I ran it off public data. They don't have 6 months." Dev, my data architect, came next. He used to lead neural modeling for a private AI firm in Montreal. Said he was tired of building intelligence for companies who ignored the results. "Just tell me what the signal is," he told me, "and I'll build the rig to catch it." Last was Marin, a creative director I mentored 5 years back at a boutique agency. She left that world after 2 back-to-back mental breakdowns induced by performative branding jobs. She showed up, looked at our blank whiteboard, and said, "God, it feels good to work somewhere that still smells like dust." We didn't call ourselves anything. On paper, we were a consultancy formed out of a Delaware LLC that didn't trace back to my name. Our contracts were ghostwritten. Client NDAs included full non-attribution clauses, no social handles, no founder bios, just deliverables. Results first, presence later. Our first 3 weeks were planning, not pitching. We weren't trying to win attention. We were building weapons. Dev's algorithm tracked behavioral shifts in brand engagement across multiple verticals. Claire built a revenue degradation index using data Virion still hadn't secured behind paywalls. Marin created modular creative prototypes that could be deployed, split-tested, and scaled, all without ever touching a brand's official channels. It was surgical, precise, and not a single click of it could be traced back to me. The conference came in week 5. I didn't want to go, but Claire insisted. "You need to see what it looks like when the castle starts to crack," she said, "and they need to see you not there." We bought a general pass under a fake name. I wore glasses I didn't need and a suit I hadn't worn since my last board presentation. Nobody looked twice. That's the gift of becoming unremarkable on purpose. The CEO took the main stage around 11:45 a.m. Flashy slides, music cues, even a TikTok cut-in that made half the room flinch. She strutted across the stage like she was auditioning for a streaming docuseries, not presenting a quarterly strategy shift. Her speech was everything I expected. Buzzwords dressed as insight. She talked about decentralized influence verticals and meme cycle brand cadence. She said authenticity 8 times, never said profit once. Halfway through, I noticed movement. 2 of her top-tier clients, brands I'd personally onboarded, stood up from the second row and slipped out the side doors. One of them turned for a brief second and caught my eyes across the room. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded. That was enough. Back at the loft the next day, we got the message. Encrypted email, no signature. Just a simple ask. Do you have capacity for Q4 realignment work? Brand confidentiality required. Willing to discuss direct transfer if terms are tight. Claire grinned. Looks like someone's ready for results. I didn't reply right away. We waited 48 hours. Then we sent a reply from a blind domain, confirming a consult slot under alias conditions. The contract arrived within the hour. 7 figures. Full discretion. Walked away from Virion without even a courtesy call. Marin stared at the signed agreement, then looked up at me. Is this revenge yet? She asked. I shook my head. No, I said. This is just bloodless war. We didn't celebrate. We didn't post. We got to work. What we gave them wasn't flashy. No viral stunts, no influencer packages, just a complete behavioral shift strategy based on actual user motivation, not assumption. Clean UX pivot, high-value content engine, 4-week growth test with full accountability baked in. Week 2 into deployment, they saw a 19% uptick in user engagement, 11% increase in returning sessions, and double-digit revenue lift. And not a single person in the public knew we existed. I stood at the whiteboard that night, marker in hand, staring at the growing cluster of client initials. Quiet movement. No noise, just presence. She was still on stage somewhere, still pitching the illusion, still clapping for herself. I didn't need applause. I just needed the algorithm to remember who taught it to breathe. The message came in encrypted, as always. No subject line, just a single attachment, an audio file, 34 minutes long. I listened to it twice before I believed it was real. It was a board meeting. Virion HQ. Someone had recorded the entire thing on a handheld mic, probably hidden in a jacket pocket. You could hear the clink of water glasses, chair legs scraping the floor, and then the voices, calm, clipped, and strained, in that way executives get when they realize they're bleeding, but don't want to look down. About 15 minutes in, someone, I recognized the voice, an old board ally named Kessler, said, maybe we needed strategy from 1975. At least then, we made money. No one disagreed, not out loud. The CEO tried to recover, said something about emerging visibility metrics and long-game relevance. But there was no conviction in her tone, just a thin layer of forced confidence sliding over panic. They were finally noticing the cracks. I forwarded the file to Claire and Dev with a single note. Confirm data match from Q3 leaks. Let's move. We were already on our 3rd cluster migration. That's what we called it when multiple clients quietly abandoned Virion and came to us. Not always in direct deals, but through one-layer intermediaries. We didn't poach. We didn't pitch. We just became the obvious alternative. And every campaign we rolled out mirrored something Virion had just failed to execute, except ours worked. Claire ran comparative analytics, side-by-side launches, 6 brands. Our ghost campaigns drove 4.6 times the engagement, 2.1 times the conversion, and retained 78% more users after 8 weeks, all without a single ad announcing our existence. Marin started calling us the antidote. I didn't correct her. We were invisible, but undeniable. Like pressure in a pipe before it bursts. That week, I got an invite to an investor dinner. Tech, media, finance. High-floor restaurant in Midtown. Open bar, off the record, legacy names only. The kind of room you don't enter unless someone vouches for your shadow. I RSVP'd under an old consulting alias I hadn't used in years. Showed up in a charcoal suit and no tie. Hair slightly longer than it had been at Virion. Just enough change to raise no alarms, but still familiar enough to anyone really paying attention. I didn't plan to talk, just watch. But halfway through the evening, as I stood near the bar sipping a rye, a voice said quietly behind me, "You almost got away with it." I turned. It was Harlan Bishop, former Virion board member, retired now, but still orbiting the industry with the same quiet sharpness. He held a glass of neat scotch and looked at me like he'd known I was coming the entire time. "You knew?" I asked. He nodded once. "Not at first, but your fingerprints are too clean to be anyone else's. That last campaign for Onyx AI, that was you." I didn't confirm or deny it. He leaned in slightly. "They should have let you run it. Instead, they handed it to a Twitter thread with legs." I almost laughed. Almost. "What are they saying now?" I asked. He took a sip. "Depends who you ask. The CEO's still pushing the long-term brand evolution story. But the board, they've started calling her quarterly reviews fiction hours." I let that sit. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally said. "Because I like watching a clean takedown," he replied. "And you?" "This is as clean as I've ever seen." He tapped his glass against mine and disappeared back into the crowd. Later that night, walking back to the loft, I thought about what clean actually meant. We weren't hacking their servers. We weren't leaking memos. We were just outperforming. Quietly, consistently, and without apology. Every new client that crossed over validated what we were doing, and every percentage point they lost was a bruise they couldn't hide under press releases. Claire was waiting when I got back. She'd been listening to the leaked audio on loop. "They're fracturing," she said. "Hard." "What's the move?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "No move, we just keep delivering." And that was it. That was the entire plan. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the schedule for next quarter. 4 more major accounts were at risk of churn. 3 had ghosted their Virion reps in the last 2 weeks. 2 had already been briefed on what we could offer. None of them knew I was behind it. I liked it that way. I wasn't trying to make noise. I was just taking back everything I built. One silent strike at a time. No speeches, no spotlight, just echoes in the boardroom. And every echo started to sound a lot like my name. The wind here moves differently. Slower, like it's tired of rushing. Out on the deck, the ocean stretches quiet and endless, beneath a sky painted with the last hint of dusk. Inside, the fire still crackles. Real wood, not gas-fed artifice. 10 chairs sit in a loose circle, half-emptied bourbon glasses, resting beside notebooks filled with scribbled arrows and circled truths. We spent 3 days here. No slides, no decks, no clickbait strategy sessions. Just firelight, open notebooks, and conversations no algorithm would ever hear. 10 CMOs, 10 companies I helped pull out of a tailspin, some gently, some surgically. They came not because I pitched them. They came because what we built together worked. Quietly. Cleanly. I never told them who ran the campaigns. Some of them guessed. None of them asked. The results were enough. Tonight was our last session. We talked until the fire wore down and the tide crept up against the rocks. One of them, a younger exec from a legacy brand turned DTC juggernaut, leaned back and said, "You didn't just change the signal, you changed the station." The others nodded. A few laughed. Not the nervous kind. The real kind. The kind that comes when you realize you're finally speaking with people who see the same map. That's what this place was built for. Not ego, not headlines, just clarity. I sat alone on the porch after they went to bed, wrapped in a wool sweater, a cigar resting between two fingers. The stars overhead blinked like low voltage. Salt in the air, smoke on my breath. For once, I wasn't thinking 3 moves ahead. I was just still. Then I heard the knock. Not the doorbell, a knock. Software intentional. I walked barefoot across the hardwood to the front door and opened it to a man in a black courier jacket. No words, just a clipboard to sign and a slim envelope handed over like it held secrets. No return address, no seal. Back on the porch, I opened it. Simple white cardstock, company letterhead, my name nowhere on it. Just a brief notice. Effective immediately, Riley Ayers has stepped down as CEO of Virion. No thank you. No mention of transition, no PR fluff, just a date. The timing was surgical, too clean to be coincidence. The board knew. They always knew. They'd watched the numbers fall, quarter after quarter. Watched their press darling lose clients she never understood. Watched the algorithm turn cold. They knew exactly where the oxygen had gone. They just couldn't say it out loud. And now, with the damage contained and the press cycle distracted, they did what boards always do. They quietly rewrote history. I held the letter in one hand and lit the cigar with the other. Took a slow draw. Let it settle in my chest before I exhaled into the night. I thought about her voice across that office table, back when she slid the termination papers over without a glance. We need someone who lives in the current algorithm. She said it like she was quoting scripture, like it was gospel. But she never understood the algorithm. She thought it was a trend. I knew it was a rhythm. Algorithms don't care about charm. They don't care about optics. They respond to behavior, real behavior, not manufactured virality, not vanity metrics, not noise dressed as novelty. And behavior always returns to value. That's why the campaigns we launched didn't trend, but they worked. That's why our clients didn't post about us, but they stayed. That's why the board never said my name. But they remembered it in every quarterly review they couldn't spin. I didn't need to come back. I didn't need the title. I didn't need the corner office. What I built was bigger than a brand. It was a pattern, a pulse, a presence. I looked out at the sea. Somewhere behind me, 10 CMOs slept soundly, knowing their houses wouldn't burn next quarter, knowing they didn't have to gamble their roadmap on a trend chaser's gut feeling, knowing they were finally part of something that understood when to speak and when to listen. The fire inside had burned low, but not out. A few last embers cracked, as if echoing back something I couldn't hear yet. I folded the letter once and slipped it into my notebook. Not as a trophy, just a timestamp. Then I leaned back, let the smoke rise into the salt air, and closed my eyes. Turns out, I didn't need to chase attention. I just had to let it find the signal.